I've never done a day of engineering, and I'm proud to be an engineer. So I know that's a little bit confusing, but I stand by that.
Welcome to the Disgruntled PM podcast, your weekly therapy session for the chaotic world of project management, transforming daily frustrations into real action. Welcome, everybody. I'm Trevor, the Disgruntled PM, joined today by my guest, Stefanie Reichman. Now, Stefanie has quite the interesting background, and as we all know, nobody ever comes to be a project manager just by that's what they wanted to do when they grew up. Stefanie went to school to be an engineer and then became a PM. So why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and tell them a little bit more about yourself, Stefanie?
Sure. Well, first, I'm super excited to be here. So thank you for the invite to join. Feel a little bit out of the comfort zone. I haven't been a PM in a little bit, but do we ever really stop being PMs? A little bit of my own background. I'm a professional civil engineer. So that means that I did a lot of school and took a lot of tests. And I can stamp and seal buildings up to 3 stories. I don't do that, but I could, which is cool. And I studied structures specifically, and while I was wrapping up that degree, realized that it wasn't my goal to stamp drawings for the rest of my life. My goal was to be a construction project manager. And to do that, I thought the best solution was more school, which we can certainly get into. But so I went to school, I continued, I should say. I got a master's in construction management out at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Go Badgers. And as part of all of that, I had a lot of different experiences, worked as a PM, ended up working in construction, not as a PM, but as something else. And then eventually actually made a whole career kind of pivot into construction tech, which has been wild and exciting and different. And for the last a little bit over 2 years, I've been sharing a lot of that pivot story over on LinkedIn, helping others do the same. I'm a co-founder of a job board for other people that are looking to make similar pivots called AEC Tech Jobs. So a lot going on, and I'm sure we'll dive into all of it or some of it today, but that's super high level me and what I do.
So generally a pretty boring person.
Yeah, I like to think so. I set the bar really low, and I try to underachieve often.
Well,
Yeah, no, it's been fun.
you know what they say about when you set the bar low and underachieve all the time, right?
What did they say?
Well,
Surprise me.
when you set the bar so low, everybody expects you to fail. So then when you do actually achieve something, they throw a party for you.
That's fair. Well, I'm waiting for the party, that's for sure. So if anyone out there wants to throw a party, let me know. No, it's been fun. I think a lot of the, setting the bar low is probably my own expectations of myself and my career and kind of the product of my environment. So it's definitely been exciting to be here on the other side of so many different storylines and yeah, feel content with the direction my career is in.
Well, that's the important thing is that you're content with it because we spend so much time, especially when you're on LinkedIn and doing social media stuff, chasing the likes and the engagements. You forget that you got to look out for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when I started, especially creating content, I was quite purposeful in terms of like making sure that it was a positive space. I think very often it's very easy, I think, whatever the circumstances, whatever the job, to slide to the negative. And I've always tried to keep it, I don't want to say light. I definitely talk about some heavier topics and I have personally experienced heavier topics, but I don't necessarily find those to be very helpful. Being a little bit of a bright light is something that I definitely gravitate towards, and I'm honored to be one of those voices.
Yeah, it really is an interesting mix of people when you start talking about the LinkedIn crowd.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely one of those things like it's what you make of it. And I
Hmm.
think people don't really realize how much you can actually like curate the type of content that you do see and don't see. And I think if people spent the time to curate their LinkedIn a little bit more, they might find more value in it, but maybe a different topic.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
We're not getting into the algorithm.
No, 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 not today. Not today.
No, that's a longer conversation over something else.
Yes, for sure, for sure. And a hard one to really nail down. And I'm certainly no expert, so I would never pretend to.
Oh, I don't even think the people that build the algorithm know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, so let's talk a little bit about your career as a engineer and working towards construction side of the house because as PMs, I always say there's three types of PMs. There's the generalist that does just about everything, except for the second one, which is the super niche topic, like the one of the subject matter expert PM that does the super niche, super unique thing. And then there's construction that's its own island unto itself.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, I kind of had this mindset of wanting to work towards a construction PM when I finished my masters and knew it was time to join the job market because eventually everyone needs a job. I really wanted to get a construction PM role, but I was obviously way too green to land anything close to that type of role. I was getting a lot of opportunities to do like estimating and takeoffs or yeah, estimating and scheduling, I'm sorry. And then there was like a pathway that was kind of laid out where in a certain number of years, like that would be my goal would be construction PM. But I was so strong-willed, I still am, but at the time probably more so, that that was what I wanted, construction PM. So I did end up landing a role for an engineering company as an assistant PM, which ended up just being a PM for smaller projects. So I think that kind of gave me a really good base level understanding of what project management could be on like a bit of a lower stakes budget and timeline and everything else because it's an engineering project. But yeah, ultimately was like, this is maybe not exactly what I want to do with the rest of my life.
So, what type of projects were you working on?
So it was for a electrical design company. So they would be building like substations and transmission lines. I thought personally like it was a little bit challenging because to your point about like being a subject matter expert, it was really hard for me personally to know that I just spent 6 years in the civil engineering world and I was back at square one, like not even understanding anything electrical. I had brought that up and they actually did have like a civil team that I kind of started working with, which felt better because they were doing like all the design for the actual transmission lines for like the structures that hold the transmission lines. So at least like there were certain terms and certain things that were familiar to me, but I found it really challenging to PM something that I wasn't technically understanding. So that ended up being challenging for me.
So, let's talk about that then, because,
Sure.
as an engineer, I've never been one, but I'd imagine that you spend a lot of time learning about a lot of stuff. And then you go into this world where you're like, oh, I'm supposed to know everything. And then you're thrown into the deep end of a completely opposite side of what you've spent your whole career learning.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely learned a lot of things. I think having the perspective being out of school and working now for a number of years, we won't say how many, I certainly have a different perspective in terms of what I learned. Like, technically, did learn a lot of very technical topics, a lot of math, a lot of science, soil, steel, concrete. Like, I learned all of these things textbook wise. However, taking a step back, what I really learned was problem solving. So the ability to be given a problem and not have like not be able to rely on the internet or a textbook or something like we were deriving formulas from like Newton's laws. I sometimes think back to like how I used to approach problems back then and I'm amazed that I did it, that I passed and then I got these degrees because it was really challenging and you had to either sit there and memorize formulas. I'm terrible at memorizing. So yeah, I would sit there and like start deriving formulas and if anyone doesn't know what deriving formulas is, it's like taking, the most basic of Newton's laws and like just starting to like piece together Lego puzzle equations to solve the problem you're trying to solve for. And while I never do that at work, I've never done that, I problem solve all the time across every type of role I've ever had. And that has become kind of my secret, not secret, my superpower. And that is really what engineering gave me.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot from various engineers that you learn, it's just like every other profession. You spend a lot of time studying and learning to regurgitate information, but what you're really doing is learning how to think. Kind of like how
Yeah.
when we study for the PMP, you're learning how to study for the exam, but you're also subconsciously learning the thought process that goes into managing a project.
Yeah. And I think that that kind of makes the difference between people that are, I would say, more successful and less successful, especially in things like the PMP. And I took the PE exam is kind of similar in that way too. If you just focus on the mechanics of the exams, like the definitions or whatever it might be, yeah, maybe you'll pass. But if you actually understand the concepts like to your core, that's a whole different game you're playing.
Yeah, you're not studying to pass the exam, you're studying to understand the mentality, kinda like how we
Yeah.
always talk about Scrum as a mentality, not a process.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's so relatable across so many different things. I certainly felt that when I took the PE exam. I considered taking the PMP, but it wasn't relevant for me, but I love to study it, I guess. Love
You are one.
tests. Love tests.
No, no. I will not be. I am never shy about it that I enjoyed taking the PMP exam so many times, it took me 4 to pass.
Wow. They yeah, I I read a quote somewhere. It's like it's not that you I just have more experience than you. I think it was like
Yeah,
something along those lines, which
yeah.
was exciting.
Well, and it goes to we talk in the PM world so much about lessons learned, and I'm sure engineers do too, and
Yeah.
everyone talks about lessons learned, but they're only applicable if you actually apply them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's always about asking, like, the hard questions and applying what you learned and moving forward with that and, all feedback is good feedback type of stuff. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of crossovers, and I do find that the project management role, the job is so applicable across so many different industries, and the skill set is just so rich, again, across so many different things that you could do. So many things you could do with kind of that experience, but also so many different places you could come into being a PM with, which is exciting,
Yeah, and so many places you can come from into the
right?
PM world too, because the skills are transferable and they don't go away,
Yeah, as long as you're good at them, right?
even if you're bad at them.
That's fair. That's fair.
We talk we talk all the time about how good you have to be at something, but sometimes good enough is just that.
Yeah, that's fair. That one's a little bit tricky for me. I think back to my desire for growth. I believe that if you want to be good at something, you've got to be undeniably good, and that just sometimes takes time. It takes some education. It takes some skill building, but anyone can get there, especially in these days. Like the information that we have at our fingertips is so incredible that there's almost no excuse to not almost be the best if that's what you want to be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't wanna say that just that good enough is the right answer all the time,
Yeah.
but we talk about striving for excellence all the time, and when we're working on projects and doing things, knowing where to stop is just as valuable as being amazing at what you do because
Yeah.
you can push that gold plating bar so far past where it needs to be, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, you've burned into your contingency funds 3 steps later because you spent all that money going past where you needed to on your requirements.
Yeah. That's totally fair. Yeah. I mean, I think that's because with the content that I put out, often attract engineers that are considering career changes. And I think that a little bit similar, but kind of the same, that sunk cost fallacy of, but I've invested so much time and effort into my career, or I've invested so much time and effort into the project. And sometimes you just need to know when it's time to move on or ship the project or kind of whatever the situation requires.
Yeah, and when you talk about career pivots, the one thing everyone forgets when you do your pivot or shift or whatever term you wanna use is you're not losing what you've done.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
you
Yeah,
spent
no,
all
go
that
ahead.
time as an engineer, you didn't lose that experience and that knowledge and those certifications. You take them with you into that new career.
Yeah, I mean, I think because it's also part of my own personal story, while that's true and it's easy to say, I think in the moment that can be a really challenging decision to come up against, mostly because you don't know what's on the other side and you do put a lot of time and effort. Like an engineering degree, it still to this day is probably the hardest thing I've ever done is my undergrad degree. It was incredibly challenging for 4 years, nonstop challenge after challenge. So I think whatever I kind of considered as engineering for me, that was really hard to step away from that. Like I did take all these like what was the point of me stressing over a steel design course, and I've never in my life used any of those things, and yet for that whole semester that was the most stressful thing in my life. So, and I think that engineers, like, we're analytical folks, we're, a little bit cautious, we're worried, we've sunk all this time and effort, we have maybe some certifications, we have some experience that we're stepping away from. And I think it's kind of challenging sometimes to consider how to reframe a lot of that. Obviously, it's been hugely beneficial in my life. I've heard so many amazing stories from folks that have made the transition themselves, but it's still in the moment a really scary decision to say, I am going to walk away. And while this some of the skills will carry forward with me, not all of them will, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I I just wanted to highlight that the thought, we talked about you talked about your undergrad and how that steel design course was all consuming for a semester.
Yeah.
We all, if you did any type of schooling or any type of education, it consumes you, and then once you always look back at it and go, it really wasn't that bad, but in the moment, it was miserable.
No, it was still pretty bad. It's been a while since I graduated, and it's like I said, it's one of the hardest it is the hardest thing I've done. I'm also a mom. That is challenging too, but in a very different way. This was like this was really, really hard.
Yeah.
It was really hard. There were so many times I had to rise to occasions that I just didn't know I had that in me. And I think more than anything, like looking back, that's what I take out of the degree is like, that was hard and we overcame it. A couple of years ago, when I started working remote and had to set up a home office, I was needing some works of art for my wall. And I actually have all three of my diplomas on my wall now, which at the time when I graduated, I promised myself I would never be just like you, a person to hang
Thanks.
up a diploma. I know, I'm like, be careful because I see your diplomas, but I told myself I would never be that person. But now having that kind of distance from the degrees and the experience and knowing how much they do actually mean to me and how much I learned from it and how much I've grown since achieving that. I actually get so much joy having it on my wall now. So
Well, there's
that feels
also
okay.
yeah, there's a couple of different things to think about though when you talk about the what we called it in the military your I love me book and your I love me wall or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And I built that behind me on my stage just because when I would go into meetings and a lot of different times, sometimes you're just trying to build that connection with people. And if they see, oh, he likes Corvettes or he went to Auburn or he went to San Diego State or whatever it may be that's in the background, that can help be that conversation bridge to make it a little bit easier to get along with someone.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because I was recently chatting with someone about having a good icebreaker question when you jump on a call or you enter a room or something, specifically around interviews because they can get pretty awkward. So I didn't realize that that's what it was behind you, but I appreciate that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And, it also is a little bit of a personality thing. Like there's behind me, you can kind of see it now, but there's the Dwight Schrute bobblehead. And then when my wife and I were watching The Office way back when it was new, there was the episode, the Valentine's Day one, where Angela bought Dwight a bobblehead. So my wife had one made of me.
That's awesome.
So
That's really cool. Yeah.
I just I've just learned over time that if you can't express your own personality on video, then you're missing out. You're missing an opportunity to just have a blank wall because that's what I had for a long time when I was working remote. And then people would just kind of sit there and stare at my wall and be like, "Where's your personality?"
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah, I think it's interesting you bring that up. I think the personality piece is definitely something that I has taken me a while to understand how important it is. I don't know if it was society or school or I don't know what it was that really ingrained in me what a professional should look like, should act like, should do with their life. And I'm realizing that that's not all true. And that people just gravitate or respond well to a personality.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good place to pause and talk about the Patreon that I have. There's two tiers. One tier is the low hanging fruit, which is $1 a month, and that's just you're helping support the show, helping me pay for all the stuff to be able to provide this great show to everyone. And then there's $5 a month, which is the drinking the Kool-Aid tier. And that's where every week, every guest that I have on does about a 20-ish minute bonus episode where I pick their brains about what their expertise is. So Stefanie and I will probably be talking about process versus tools, planning versus reality, and she might even be giving us some tips on how to work with engineers as a PM because every in my experience, every group that's like a subject matter expert have their own quirks. And if you can kind of learn from that group what it is that makes them respond a little bit better as the PM, you can get more buy-in. So if you didn't already know you were signed up for that, you knew, you know. So let's transfer back to the show a little bit here and talk about, we talked about personality, we talked about how you came about, and one of the things that I know you're known for is for not just an engineer.
That's right.
Can you explain that mindset and how you kind of came up with that?
Sure. So the tagline is more than an engineer. And if I'm being totally honest, it came about very randomly. I had been meeting with different groups that had I would say not the most positive spin on leaving one industry and going into another. And we kind of chatted about it at the beginning, like the positivity mindset has always been really important to me. But when I started thinking about who I am and what my career has led me to, it always kind of started with me being an engineer, like rooted in that. But then it was always more than an engineer. So this is very niche, a little bit off topic, but it kind of came to me pretty randomly. I was in the market for a new hat, as one does in the wintertime. And I went online and got made a hat that said more than an engineer on it because it felt right to be representing something that I felt really good about as opposed to whatever athletic brand people like. So I started wearing the hat around and got a lot of positive feedback from it. Actually went back and ordered a whole bunch and sold them for a while. PMs listening, that's quite the undertaking to be the the sourcer, the PM, the shipper, the organizer, the everything. I learned a lot from the process. It was really cool. And maybe some other cool projects that will be coming out of all of that, depending on when this episode airs and how those projects are tracking. But yeah, it was really important for me to have something that I can kind of relate to and feel really good about. But yeah, it definitely came out almost by accident. Wasn't really a plan to have like a tagline necessarily, but definitely feels right. And I think more than anything, it's that idea that I think as society, maybe it's so easy to put people in boxes. So my boxes would be engineer, it would be mom, it would be, a worker in construction tech. Like there's so many different labels that either myself or society have kind of placed on me. And I've always felt like I was just trying to push out of this box that again, like I was placing or society, whoever was placing it on me, I felt always a little bit trapped in it. Like I want to color outside my lines. And that has always been a really big struggle for me personally. And so I think this idea of like we're more than whatever it might be has always it has aligned really, really well with me, and has aligned really well with the community, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I can tell you right now that some of my best ideas come to me at the most random times. You know,
Yes.
I I've said before numerous times that PM Monday came to me when I was taking a shower on a Monday morning, and I was like, why not come up with a way? Because everyone talks about we argue over the minutiae and details of everything, but nobody ever zooms out and just explains it to the people that don't know anything.
Yeah, exactly. I think we should have like voice memo capability in showers. That has been like a top of mind thing for me for years because, yeah, it's like such a great place to get ideas. When I started writing content on LinkedIn, I admittedly didn't really have a direction or, yeah, a solid direction, we'll call it. And I would call it my toothbrush thoughts because it was always whatever I was thinking about when I was brushing my teeth that would end up inspiring the post for the next day. Um, it's now gotten a little bit more sophisticated, but yeah, I used to call it toothbrush thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten to the point now where I have a open note in my phone at all times of whenever an idea pops into my head, I throw it down there and, you know, there's been some really good ideas that I've gotten, and if
Yeah.
I didn't write them down, they would have been lost to the regions of time and space of my mind.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I used to do notes. I actually text myself now, and then I like heart it when I action it, so I know it's been actioned or posted or whatever that might be. It's not a great system, but it works, especially as like ideas come in the randomest places.
Yeah, I have my notes in my phone, and then I have a Word document of
Mm.
half-baked posts, fully written posts,
Wow.
ideas, everything, everywhere in between.
Yeah, it's hard to get everything organized and things. I think it's interesting and exciting sometimes to hear how people organize themselves, but I think for the most part, it's not as sophisticated systems as people might think.
No, it's really not, and I joke that with people that I'm a PM by trade. I've been doing this for close to 15 years now, and when I was building out my tracking system for the show of guests and all that, I was using Excel for the longest time, and then I was having trouble with conditional formatting, and I just sat there and looked at my screen. I was like, "What am I doing? This is a Kanban board if ever anything was made for it."
Yeah.
So then I took the hour it took me to redo everything and put it in a Kanban board, and now my workflow is so much faster and easier, but I wasn't thinking like a PM. I was thinking like an organizer.
Yeah. Yeah, I do really appreciate the time that I spent as a PM because I do think that it complemented really well like it helped me really action a lot of the like problem solving skills that I had started to develop or learn as part of my degree. Because, yeah, I do think it's really interesting when we consider different problems through different lenses, especially like a PM lens. And I often have to get myself off of what I call the ground floor and say, like, let's see the 10,000 foot view. And I think that that oftentimes is like the view that the PM hopefully is having. I don't know if that's your kind of thoughts as well, but that's always kind of how I viewed my experience as a PM.
Well, we have to view I view it as I've got to see it down at the I've got to see it in the lobby, on the first floor, second floor, third floor, and then outside from the parking lot. 'Cause it's not just about one aspect of a project. If you're the PM, you're overseeing it all. So you've got to see all angles, kind of like as a, if you're thinking about building a building, you're not just concerned with one part of it, you're concerned with all of it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about your platform that you built.
Sure. AEC Tech Jobs.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Where should we start? There's so much there.
Well, why don't you tell the audience about it?
Sure. Yeah. So AEC Tech Jobs came about in a couple different ways, but really the main problem was people like me that were engineers or people from the construction industry, architects that were looking to make a change into construction tech. I think as the last few years have really put a strong spotlight on tech and a lot of the perks in tech. There's obviously a lot of real challenges in the construction, engineering, architecture space. And I think that as opposed to people saying like, I'm going to go and get an MBA and, completely change the whole trajectory of my life, which, works for some people. That's not an option for everybody, nor is that an interest for everybody. So the idea is how can we kind of readjust people's skill sets and their technical expertise and their experience and leveraging that to a tech company who is kind of hungry for that type of experience. So, what the issue that we kind of found that I myself found was it's really hard to find these companies because, for example, I'm a customer success manager now. If you type in customer success manager on a job board like LinkedIn, you'll find a million things. And I, with my background as a civil engineer and construction experience, it would make sense for me to naturally go to a construction tech company because I was the customer and now I'm on the other side of it. So we found that it was just really, really hard for people to find that. And so job seekers were making lists, which is what I did, list of the softwares I was using. And that list is quite small. And so those companies get all the applicants, but what about all the other companies? So that's where AEC Tech Jobs was born. For people not familiar, AEC is architecture, engineer, construction. And so it's roles that are specific to those tech companies that are solving problems within those industries. And yeah, it's been about a year since we launched, which has been super exciting. It's been so well received because there isn't anything quite like it. I think we just went through, we've got over 2,500 monthly active users, which is pretty insane for a new website. Lots of really great feedback. We're getting some amazing testimonials of people, that never would have heard about this company if not for AEC Tech Jobs. Then the companies that are on there are excited to be getting really high quality candidates that are from the industry. So it's been just an exciting challenge all around.
So let's back up a little bit there because you talked about your role as a customer success manager. And I know if like you said, you type that into LinkedIn, you get thousands of results, and odds are no two of them are the same because it's not,
Yeah.
I mean, even if you look at engineering roles, no two are the same. But when you talk about roles like that, there's such catch-all terms for so many different things.
Yeah, and I'm sure you see that also on the PM side. I think
Mhm.
it's also such a catch-all term, and I think that's really where it becomes important, which I know is so hard for job seekers to start filtering the jobs because it does take a lot of time, but it is important because no two PM roles are quite the same. So yeah, it does become a little bit tricky there.
Actually, a lot of job descriptions are the same, sadly.
That's fair.
You know,
Well,
I
the responsibilities might be different though,
yes.
or the industry or the type of role. And so I do think it's really important to kind of consider what your background is and like what your skill sets are, because that ends up being the easiest path for you, as opposed to like, wanting to make like a full, both an industry pivot and a role pivot, I think is really hard at the same time. Possible, but
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah, if you want a really good story about job descriptions, go back to my interview with Steven Sopko titled "Welcome to the Goat Rodeo."
Oh boy.
He tells a really good story about a job description that he helped
Oh boy.
create.
I'll have to go check that out. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
doesn't surprise me, but yeah, it's challenging out there.
Well, yeah, and that was back in, I think that one released in November of 25.
Okay.
So yeah, it it really is interesting, and we could talk all day just about job descriptions, but now I want to get to the fun part of the show where I ask you my personalized question just for you.
Oh boy. Okay. I'm a
So,
little nervous, but let's go.
well, remember the show is family friendly.
That's fair. Okay.
So,
Let's get to
so
it.
it can't be
That's fair. I appreciate that.
so so you're more than an engineer, and I want to take that kind of run with it a little bit of
Sure.
should you were you able to give yourself advice back when you were 18 before you started your career path again? Would you have still done engineering or gone into something completely different knowing what you know now?
This question's complicated by a few things. It, and this is a longer story. I actually graduated high school at 16. So by 18, I was like,
Okay, well, we'll
I
back
was
that up
locked
too
in.
we'll back that up school.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes. All that to say, the frontal lobe was not developed at all.
Are
I
any
wouldn't.
of ours?
No, 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 no. They say at a certain point, but I don't know. I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change a thing. I think that every decision leads you to where you're meant to be. And while that sounds really cliche, I do really believe that. I think there were a lot of lessons that needed to learn. I think the one thing, if I could go back and like give myself advice or change something, I would really encourage myself to not take the things that I was taking, meaning I think there were a lot of people around me that just said not positive things. And I certainly let that cloud my judgment very, very often. And I think it's one of the reasons, for example, that like my undergrad degree was so challenging for me was because I was also like internally fighting all these preconceived notions that like women shouldn't be engineers and like no one's ever going to be interested in like being my partner because I'm an engineer and that's undesirable. And I think there were a lot of these narratives that I kind of had to come to terms with, which has taken me a very long time. But some that I still think about very, very often because when things are said to you when you're so young, you don't really understand where it's necessarily coming from. And that it really had nothing to do with me and more their own preconceived notions of life.
Yep.
So, yeah, I personally wouldn't change anything. I love my degree. I love what I learned. I've never done a day of engineering and I'm proud to be an engineer. So I know that's a little bit confusing, but I stand by
No,
that.
no, it's not. I mean, my undergrad is in economics and I've never been an economist, but gives me a lot of gives me a lot of credibility when when I mention something about the economy or money and stuff, and then people are like, "Oh, you got a degree. Let me hear what you've got to say." And I'll
Yeah.
really say, "I'm an idiot."
I'm sure that's not true. Yeah, I think I know that that's probably like the next anyone who's listening is like, well, that's a very expensive piece of paper. For me, that was definitely worth it in terms of like the skills that I learned and like the credibility that I and the confidence that that credibility ended up giving me and that it does give me. So yeah, I feel bad to think that people spent all this time and effort on things and then like truly regret it. I know people feel that way, but I try not to live my life that way.
Yeah, and I mean, it really comes down to there was a saying that I heard a long time ago that I've kind of lived my life by, and that is everybody makes the right decision, or the best decision they can at that moment with the information they have.
Yeah.
Because the moment you decide something, you have more information now, and you can realize that was a bad decision or that was a good decision, but you don't have, but you didn't have that information 30 seconds ago.
Yeah.
And when we sit there and do paralysis by analysis and spend all of our time thinking about something and ruminating before we decide, you're just putting it off. Like we were talking before the show that I had something delivered today. I spent a month and a half deciding over it. And then once I clicked buy on it, I was like, okay, decision's made. I'm done. Now
Yeah.
I'm either going to like it, I'm going to hate it, or somewhere in between, but I don't have to go back and forth and waffling between three options anymore.
Yeah. And I think that's such a great point, and frankly, it's something that I'm still working on. One day I'll get better at it, but there's still a bunch of things in some cart on my phone somewhere that I should really have bought 3 weeks ago, but I'm still thinking about it. Maybe by the time this episode airs, I'll have bought it. But yeah, I do think that we do spend a lot of our time thinking and stressing and worrying. And sometimes there's a real freedom to letting go to a lot of that. And especially when we're in a position to take smaller risks, that's a really cool place to be. So I mentioned the hats, and I think that's a really great place to talk about it. Like, got a lot of positive feedback and then was kind of like on the fence. Should I do like a limited hat drop? Would anyone care? Was this going to be a thing? At a certain point I said, like this is a business for me. Like I've made enough money to cover it if it's a complete loss. And like how much money am I willing to lose on just buying a bunch of hats? And the worst case scenario is everyone in my family just gets a hat for the holidays. And yeah, I ended up just like taking the leap of faith, ordering the hats. No one's getting them for the holidays. They're all sold. So they're all
Well,
engineers, so it would work.
yeah, but I mean, it just like me starting this show,
Yeah.
I have, I see all the time on LinkedIn, someone will tag the show and tag me and say it was a great episode. I'm like, I didn't even know somebody listened.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if anyone's listening right now, you should tag us on LinkedIn
Exactly.
because we love to see it. Yeah, I think it's really cool, especially when I think that's kind of been one of the most rewarding aspects of like posting on social media is like, sometimes I'll post and it'll be, a great response and comments and likes, and that feels great, of course. But there's also some days where, a post won't be as successful or as great, but I'll get a really kind DM, usually on the day where I feel like, what's the point of all this? That says, you're helping me, you've helped me, and this is how you've helped me. And so I do think that that gratification is pretty.
Well, and then there's also one other thing too that we always forget as creators is just because someone didn't comment, someone didn't like, people see your stuff and then
Yeah.
they may reference it casually in conversation to somebody else, and it can get 3 to 4 layers deep of people that you're reaching, and you have zero knowledge of that because no one is saying thank you, but that doesn't mean you didn't reach people.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's because I keep going back to the hats now. I mean, it's fun that they've gone all around the country and Puerto Rico too. But yeah, someone went to like a taping of a TV show and they sent me a photo of them wearing the hat at the TV show, and the hat's been on hikes and walks and travels and airplanes and cross country moves, and yeah, it's super exciting, I think, more than anything because it's like a physical item, so like people can like hold it and be part of that community officially. So yeah, no, it's super fun. But yeah, there's definitely nothing quite like it, especially when you're kind of putting a piece of yourself out there for the world essentially to judge. So I do think that positive feedback, whether you're at work, I mean, everyone loves positive feedback, getting the recognition. So especially for creators, it does feel good.
Yeah, I still wouldn't even consider myself a creator, even though everyone else says I am.
Yeah. If you're
So,
creating, then you're a creator, right? I think.
yeah. So I think now's the time where I'm going to pass the floor over to you, let you tell the audience where they can find you, what you want them to look up, and I'll have links for everything in the show notes.
Sure. Well, I want to say thank you. A couple of resources. You can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I guess there'll be a link in the show notes. Let me know what you think about the episode. And yeah, let me know about your career. And then we can also maybe link AEC Tech Jobs if there are any people in the audience that are within that sphere that are kind of interested in what that job board looks like. And if you want to let me know if you're already using it and maybe you didn't know that I was one of the co-founders of it, then you can let me know on LinkedIn. That's yeah, the resources, I guess.
Okay. Well, I think that that's a great place to stop for this episode. We may have you back later because
Yes.
there's always more to talk about. I want to thank the Patreon subscribers, and also don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow. Interact with the show on all the social platforms. And if you enjoy these episodes, tell all your friends. If you don't enjoy the episodes, give another one a shot because you're probably going to like that one better. So, with that, I'll end like I always do. May all your deliverables be on time, your budget's in the black, and your scope not creeping. For Stefanie Reichman, I'm still Trevor, and I'm still the disgruntled PM. Thanks for listening.